Hello and welcome to another instalment of the Wyfutbol podcast with me, Michael Dryden and Etches Adogru. This week, with the 2022 African Cup of Nations on the horizon, we take a look at Nigeria, their surprise performances in the 90s, issues currently with the NFF, Football Federation, and dual heritage, African players in Europe, and we'll discuss whether the Super Leagues will ever rise again. Before we start, please follow us on Twitter at yfootball underscore and subscribe with us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Acast, and YouTube. Etches, how you doing?
Yes, good mate. I bought Football Manager a week ago, week and a half ago. I've already completed
Mm.
1.5 seasons. So it shows how my time's been going. I'm deciding to bring Nottingham Forest to the big time.
Ah,
Yeah, i.e. Premier League and further Champions League glory is the ultimate aim. But yeah, it's going well so far, so I'm in pretty good spirits. We've just had the winter break, which I assume they're going to implement next year. So from November, I think it's November 15th to Boxing Day, I don't have a game because of the World Cup,
okay.
which I assume will be the case for us this coming winter or next year. Sorry. When obviously the World Cup kicks off, a bit boring to be honest, because you just have like a 4 week break and you've got nothing to really do. Well, aside from watching the World Cup, but
Mm.
it'll be interesting to see how they even do it league wise. Because that's what I've thought about quite a lot. So obviously in the Prem, that will affect a fair few players of each sides. But then, will League One and League Two continue? I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think for the EFL as well as the Prem, they're bringing the season they're starting the season a lot earlier. I think it also applies to the EFL, but yes, with the Championship, it will still apply because you will have players not being able to compete because they might be at the World Cup.
Mm.
League One, League Two might be that might not be the case. So yeah, it's a pod episode in itself, Edges. That's what it is.
Yeah, it is. This is a very good point. Anyway, Jordan, how you doing?
Yeah, not bad. Santa Claus was kind. I didn't get Football Manager. I'm still on Football Manager 2020 with a Darlington save that is now in 2028.
Mm.
So I feel as if either I want to take this one on. You know, you see them guys on YouTube, or sorry, on Twitter. Not that I follow loads of Football Manager accounts, but the ones I do, it'll have some guy who like is like Aberdeen manager in the year like 2056, and they've got like an 80,000 seat stadium. I feel like that's what I want to do with Darlow, or I'll just sack it off and that'll be it. I don't think I want to start again,
Yeah,
because
fair.
it just takes over, man. Like as you've done, I know it's a Christmas period, but you've spent a lot of time recently on it. And I just think, going forward, I'm not a spring chicken anymore. I just think I'm probably not going to buy it again. Who knows? I might have I might have two kids and I might change my mind. But um, but yeah, got an Apple Watch to assist me with my running and all of daily activities. So that's very nice. But yeah, it's been quite a chilled festive period, which has been needed because since like restrictions, I know it's like for quite a lot of this year, we've had the restrictions have been lifted and we've been able to come back out and socialize. But it's just been manic, man, particularly the Christmas period because everyone was making up from last year and it was just crazy. So it's been good to chill, and we'll be doing so until Jan when we have some exciting plans lined up um, on the pod.
Very true.
But
Very, very true indeed.
just aside from our exciting plans in the future, let's talk about our exciting pod today. So why this episode?
Right, so as many of you know, I'm an Arsenal fan. Shock. Funny enough, I didn't pick them a Football Manager, but that's a story for another day. But I'm also Nigerian as well, and with African Cup of Nations coming up, I kind of wanted to do an episode on that, and particularly focus on Nigeria, who kind of mirror England in a way. Football mad in a sense, but always kind of flattered to deceive. England less so recently, but definitely for decade after decade, probably since '66. Current holders in AFCON are Algeria. They knocked out Nigeria in the semi-finals last time. Mahrez with a screamer in the last
Mm,
minute. Nigeria ended up finishing third place after they beat Tunisia, and Nigeria have actually come third 8 times in the competition,
mm,
which is mad in itself. Yet they've only won it 3 times overall. Pele famously said an African country would win the World Cup by the year 2000, which kind of ties into this point around what we're going to talk about, particularly Nigeria in the 90s, whereby what happened, Nigerians are football mad. It's one of the most popular countries in the world, home to so many stars, including JJ Kocha, formerly of Bolton and PSG, and Eintracht Frankfurt. Kanu played for a whole wealth of teams, Ajax, as well as Arsenal, Portsmouth. Taribo West, who played for both the Milans. Osimhen, who currently is starring for Napoli.
Mm.
Chukwueze at Villarreal. Finidi George, who played for Ajax as well as Ipswich Town. Joseph Yobo,
Joseph Yobo.
again, Everton stronghold. Wilfred Ndidi, who's one of the better Premier League midfielders at Leicester. John Obi Mikel and Sunday Oliseh as well. So it's kind of looking into why Nigeria have constantly faltered on bigger stages and not dominated even on the continent, and to see whether that'll change anytime soon.
Yeah, but I've been on Google quite a lot for this episode whilst looking at your notes and adding some stuff in because my knowledge of Nigeria needs to improve and has done going through this. But population of over 200 million, which is massive, seventh
Mhm.
largest population in the world. Which I knew there it was a large country with a large population, but I didn't realize it was that extensive. You did forget to mention from that list of stars the legend that is the Yak Yakubu. Uh,
Feed the yak and he will score.
yeah.
Feed the yak and he'll score.
I'm not too sure how amazing he ever was, but he was a decent Premier League striker. He was kind of your standard Everton striker back when they were kind of like a fifth, sixth, seventh place team. You also forgot to mention another star, Victor Anichebe, former teammate of Yakubu. The only reason I mention him, bit of a sidetrack, but do you remember when he played for Sunderland and his like social media manager, whoever it was, PA,
Mm,
told him to basically told him what to tweet, which probably has happened with a lot of players,
mm.
but he forgot to take off the tweet something like. So the tweet was like, tweet something like, "How are the lads?" And it was so embarrassing. He's quite like a jovial character. I think he came back from it quite well. And he was only with us for a brief period, so I kind of felt sorry for him because he wouldn't
How
know.
weird, how weird that
Imagine.
do something like that. That's hilarious. I think Anichebe really ties in well to the point I'm going to make later on about dual nationality players, and kind of how they work in terms of how Nigeria potentially loses out on quite a few. Yakubu was very unfortunate to miss the list. I think the forwards I mentioned probably are of higher quality. Obviously, Kanu I think he won the Champions League at Ajax. I think he played at Inter as well as Arsenal, and was part of the Invincibles. And obviously, Oshimen is starring at Napoli and is currently the most expensive African player of all time.
Mm,
Maybe the most expensive Nigerian. I can't remember if him or Pepe is more money. I think he went for about 70 million. Pepe is a bit higher than that, but definitely
mm.
top two or three. So yeah, it kind of remains to be seen.
Yeah, tongue in cheek around Yakubu. I don't think he was as strong as Kanu and Okocha. But also just quick shout out to former Sunderland midfielder Dixon Atu, who what a man giant he was. And also on your point, Josh Maja, he is of the Nigerian descent, and given his age, I'm not too sure what he's up to now since leaving Sunderland, but he would be one in that kind of dual heritage argument potentially if he ever kicked on. He had that foray at Fulham last season. Um, so yeah, so that would be a good point we're coming to.
Yeah, well, that's yeah. We'll definitely touch on it as well because yeah, there are a few players like that to kind of talk about. So moving on to the 90s, which is kind of Nigeria's golden era, unfortunate era. I can't remember. I was a bit too young.
Mm,
The Nigerians made their name on the world stage during the 90s as they reached the highest rank of fourth in the world in June 1994.
mm,
They also had two great World Cups in 94 and 98, where they played scintillating attacking football, causing major upsets along the way. The 94 tournament saw them line up against the Bulgarians. You had Stoichkov in their ranks, Argentina and Greece. Nigeria beat Bulgaria, narrowly lost to Argentina, and beat Greece 2-0 to top the group before losing to Italy in the round of 16 in extra time 2-1, with Baggio scoring the 88th and 102nd, which is that's pretty
mm,
heartbreaking. 88 minutes on the clock and you're winning 1-0.
yeah.
That's a tough one to swallow. But for a World Cup debutant, this put Nigeria on the map. They surprised many with their talent and ability on the world stage. I mean, they did lose to Argentina, but to top that group, you would have thought they'd probably be coming in to come last. Um, to then take on Italy, who I believe got to the final of that tournament as well, is also an incredible achievement as well. This was followed by gold at the '96 Olympic Games, which I think from a European gaze, sorry, we kind of always, we don't really take it that seriously. But I know
Mm,
The South Americans and the Africans in particular tend to take it quite seriously. Nigeria
yeah.
actually beat Argentina in the final, and that side had Crespo, Diego Simeone, Ortega, Javier Zanetti, and Ayala, to name a few. They actually beat Brazil 4-3 in the semi-finals on golden goal, which
Mm,
is mad. Obviously, golden goals retired. Did a podcast on that a very long time ago now.
yeah.
The likes of the original Ronaldo, the original R9 was playing Dida, Roberto Carlos, and Rivaldo, with Bebeto and Juninho, the Middlesbrough Juninho,
Mm,
if you
the
remember.
boys. That is
Yeah,
the
yeah,
boys. Yeah, the Middlesbrough Junior. Yeah,
yeah,
it's
the
always one of
Middlesbrough.
those players that just like the Janino that played for PSG, just seemed to be like revered, but didn't really do a great deal apart from the Janino of PSG scoring. Or was it Leon he played for?
Leon, yeah.
Leon scoring absolute worldy free kicks
He,
almost
he
week
scored
in week
so
out.
many. He scored far too many. So yeah, Colombia, Nigeria at that point, they're buzzing. What they won the AFCON in '94, had a very good World Cup, won the Olympic gold in '96. So then along kind of came the '98 World Cup in France, and they entered the group with Spain, Bulgaria again, and Paraguay. This is where Nigeria famously beat Spain 3-2 and Bulgaria before losing to Paraguay, having already qualified. Spain were actually dumped out of the tournament from that. Uh, Nigeria were favourites in their last 16 game against Denmark, but they ended up losing 4-1, with former AC and Inter Milan defender Turibo West stating that most of the squad parted in booze the days before the round 16 loss, sorry, with women said to have entered the camp. Which kind of ties into a point I'm going to mention later on about the professionalism and also organisation of the Nigerian squad. And obviously, with that information, it's no surprise that they got stuffed.
Yeah, it kind of screams of us maybe it's like a side that it's just come through in the '90s. It's not tasted success before in the international stage, and so it's just you've got A, it's a big deal, and B, maybe not having got the kind of maturity of organisation that we'll come on to touch on. But even so, like that was a time when even in the most developed leagues there was issues we saw in the English game around alcohol consumption. Not necessarily during tournaments, but during league campaigns with the old Arsenal boozers, as we'll call them. Obviously, we had the Gaza dentist chair before the Euro '96 tournament, and all the players going out. So it was a time when alcohol wasn't encouraged, but it was not particularly frowned upon. Players would go out quite a lot. But jokes aside, it's such a shame because that lack of discipline has potentially inhibited such a talented side from going so far on the world stage.
Funnily, going back to Taribo West, Thierry Henry said he was the hardest defender he ever faced in his career.
What does he mean by hard though? Does he mean
As
wouldn't
in
want to fight or
most
just
difficult,
tough?
most difficult to come up
Oh, most
against,
difficult.
which
Yeah.
was really interesting. They asked him very recently, actually, on a Match of the Day article, not Match of the Day, Sky Sports piece. I think they were asking the most difficult opponent faced, best player they played with. It was him and Carragher. They gave quite standard answers. But yeah, Henri said it was Thierry West. They clashed during Henri's time at Monaco when Taribo West was at Auxerre. Before
Hmm.
Taribo West went on to play for Inter AC, Derby on loan, um, and then Plymouth Argyle eventually, and then a few other clubs as well, which I thought was interesting.
Well, allegedly, John Terry said that Kenwyn Jones was the hardest player that he'd ever played against. Allegedly, this is
Kenwyne
a rumor.
Jones.
He was also a Sunderland player, and obviously, given I'm a Sunderland fan, I'm around the rumor mill quite a lot.
Yeah,
So
you are.
a lot of crap could be could come out of that mill.
Yeah, that's very that's a good point, to be fair. I kind of since that golden period in the '90s, and Nigeria flattered to deceive. They were piss poor in the 2002 World Cup, coming bottom of the group, didn't qualify for 2006, and failed to leave the group in 2010. The quality of the sides during that time have been questionable. Obviously, stars like JJ Kocher have been in most of those sides, but the quality around them has not quite been the same. Um, Many of the talents have failed to live up to the hype, such as Victor Obinna, who was formerly at Inter Milan as a youth, as well as Joel Obi. A last 16 spot was secured in the 2014 World Cup, but they were unconvincing in the group stage, to be honest, and France comfortably dumped them out. The 2018 tournament, they failed to qualify again. It was better, but it wasn't particularly outstanding. But there were the makings of a potential new group coming through, which have grown since that last tournament. That could potentially say maybe Nigeria have a bit more to be able to achieve in the years to come. I think the current crop are marred by similar issues that previous squads have struggled with. But the question we're going to kind of dive into is what those issues are and whether they can rise above them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for someone like myself, for example, who's English, who grew up in England, and his knowledge of whose knowledge of African national sides, in African football generally during that time would have been very limited. Um, as a kind of someone growing up in this country, I don't think Nigeria were ever kind of perceived as being like a strong footballing nation. For those again with limited knowledge, that's largely as you mentioned because kind of a lack of success at World Cup level from the 2000 onwards. I think Senegal and Ghana are the only two to have reached the quarters. Ghana going out to Uruguay, and I was absolutely devastated because of Luis Suarez's antics and the fact that he's just a bit of a knob. Um, but
Mm,
growing up, it was kind of a lot of the stars in England, you had Drogba, yeah, Toure, Kolo Toure, all represented Ivory Coast. Likes of Michael Essien represented Ghana. Obviously, you had the likes of Kanu, but he was still kind of a little bit before kind of our time in a sense that for you, less so because you're an Arsenal fan, but for myself, he was like a 90s footballer. And obviously, the legend Asamoah Gyan representing Ghana as well. But yeah, so I think just the point is Nigeria I think in this country, kind of in the last say 20 years haven't been perceived as a strong football nation, but hopefully that's about to change.
No, I completely agree with you because, as I said, the squad's kind of gone for a lull. We had JJ Kocher. We got JJ Kocher in the twilight of his career. At that time, he was 30 odds when he came to the Premier League, and with probably, even they had some great highlights, it's probably slightly past his
Mm,
actual best days.
yeah.
We're talking about Kanu's best period of time. We're talking Kanu's peak was probably the late 90s, early 2000s. Again, by the time we were really watching football. So early 2000s, when the Invincibles happened, he was also probably past his best. We saw him at Portsmouth. He probably wasn't the force he once was in the mid to late 90s and especially early 2000s. So the big Nigerians in terms of player profile that I discussed in that list earlier were either players that predominantly played in the 90s or ones now. As in ones literally, we're
Mm,
talking
yeah.
about a very recent crop of players because there was a big lull. I mean, there were times I used to watch Nigeria play, and we've got John Obi Mikel as our best player, and he's not the
Mm,
most exciting player around. Whereas I look at the team now, especially in the forward areas, there's some really talented individuals. Iheanacho is one I did mention as well in that early list as well. So I'll kind of go into that.
yeah.
But the first main reason why Nigeria have all of these problems is the Nigerian Football Federation, which in short is a joke. Many African sides, Nigeria aren't alone, struggle with their federations not paying bonuses or their coaches properly. But in Nigeria's case, this has caused loads of issues in the past. The squad threatened to strike in 2019 over bonus row related to the 18 World Cup. A similar issue happened in the lead up to the 14 World Cup with the president of the country getting involved to quell the problem. Former head coach Gerhard Rohr, who was recently sacked by Nigeria for lackluster performances, in particular against weak opposition, as well as questionable selection calls, was said to be paying some of his own staff out of his own pocket,
Mad.
while not being paid himself for months at a time. And I think this really ties in well to similarities with England, not in terms of how the FA are run, but in terms of England got their act together with England's DNA. We did the podcast on that well over a year ago, looking into like what England have tried to do in terms of build youth from under 16 level up, and it's beginning to work. We're seeing there are types of profiles in the English game which I don't think we'd seen for a very long time, and now it's becoming the norm. The likes of Jaden Sancho, Phil Foden, Emil Smith Rowe.
Yeah, even
Hardly,
like say like Calvin Phillips, players like that, which we back in the day, either we didn't have them in that mold, or they weren't favoured at international level, whereas now
no,
they are.
no, exactly. And I think that's all of this underground work that we're not even really seeing that England have put in from the ground up, which Nigeria really lack. You need that level of structure from the top in order to help them thrive because Nigeria have dominated youth ball. They've actually won five under 17 World Cups, which is
Mm.
mad. There were rumors of players' ages being masked. So they now do like bone tests. They now do bone testing to determine the players' ages, which is mad. But in recent times, Nigeria won the 2015 and 2013 edition, and funnily enough, that contains a lot of the stars that they have now. So Chukwueze, Iheanacho, and Osimhen were part of the 2015 winning side, and they're now
Mm.
playing quite well in Europe. Ndidi was part of the squad before. So you can kind of see that, when they are winning on these international successes, it probably isn't due to them lying about their age, because these players have actually managed to develop and actually alter games in the professional men's game. But it's that level of competition and that level of talent that is clearly evident at such a young level, which they're not nurturing correctly, and that ultimately comes from how the federation are handling these young stars as they go through the system.
Yeah, you mentioned England DNA. There's also, we've got the France Clairefontaine system, which we've
Yeah.
mentioned. We've had pods on before, or AirPod. We also, Germany were championed in the past for kind of this kind of philosophy of bringing through players from the very kind of, well, at least the under 18 level all the way through to the first team, and instilling the same kind of playing style and culture. And how that's kind of been deemed to be crucial to success, just like how Clairefontaine has been deemed to be crucial to France's success in recent years. And England DNA has been kind of referenced as being the reason why England, or one of the reasons why England is becoming a lot better on the international stage than what they were.
Mm.
Um, so it seems as if initiatives like this are required, or some kind of process or program to that end, where you're building a culture, you're building a system and a philosophy at the very kind of lower levels of your international system, right through to the top, so that you can kind of build over time this like not just about bringing the quality players through, but also they're all unified, they're used to playing with each other. But I mean, I don't know, in terms of like money, we haven't talked about money yet. And I mean, I mentioned England, I mentioned Germany, I mentioned France. They're wealthy Western nations with wealthy football institutions. Something like Clairefontaine system can't be cheap. So I wonder if that's a factor as well in Nigeria, or a country like Nigeria, despite the size of its population and economy, and being able to mimic that sort of thing. But given the strife you've mentioned in the federation, I wonder if, regardless of of investment and the availability of money, whether or not it's just a if it even is a consideration.
Yeah, the money definitely ties into it, but I think there are other federations that have, some of the South American sides. I'm looking at probably the likes of potentially Chile and some other potential teams around there where their economies aren't necessarily as booming as some of the Western countries, and yet they still manage to have a relative conveyor belt of talent. Some of the smaller
Mm,
European nations as well. And I'm aware that Nigeria obviously struggles with things like corruption and allocating of resources and that sort of stuff. But yeah, you would assume more needs to actually be done in terms of actually um, providing that environment for its stars to shine, because the North African sides that have seemed to have got their acts together don't really have that pool of talent, but seem a lot more organized in terms of the Egyptians and the Algerians. And they've never, so Egypt have predominantly in recent times dominated the African Cup of Nations because they didn't really have the player pool or talent, but they had the organization from the top down. I know they now have
mm,
Salah. I'm actually talking about a time before Salah. And even Algeria as well in recent times, they just seem a lot more organized and together. And yeah, Nigeria kind of lack that cohesion, which starts from the top down.
yeah.
And it ties into the next point of dual heritage woes, which is, migration is unavoidable, happens everywhere, and unless if you love Brexit, you can't prevent that. And many people, including myself, are dual heritage, which makes it difficult in sport. You always want players to play for who they truly represent. I have quite a controversial opinion on this. I actually believe that whoever you represent at youth ball and under 21 level is who you should represent at seniors. I get it before
Mm,
then, but I'm quite stern on it because I think what you tend to really get is players will play at international level for whoever is willing to give them an appearance, but they ultimately may want to represent someone else, because I'm quite patriotic in that sense. So we're going to touch on England again. I get why players do it, because you get George Weah, who's the only African player to have won Player of the Year, Ballon d'Or, sorry, and he was Liberian, so we never saw him at the World Cup.
mm,
But then you got people like Jack Grealish and Declan Rice. Obviously, Jack Grealish, Irish Youth International for quite a few games. Declan Rice had 2 appearances for Ireland. There's a
mm,
level of like, the patriotic side in me, which is a bit like, Did you ever care for playing for Ireland? Because what happens is Ireland, like Nigeria, like probably Wales and Scotland, all become stepping stones for a certain country. Nigeria's is normally England. Western African countries such as Ivory Coast and Guadeloupe, which is in the Caribbean, tend to be feeders towards France because obviously they're French speaking. Algeria as well, and Morocco, and
Yeah.
that sort of stuff. And it kind of draws a line in terms of I understand why players want to do it. But this obviously hinders sides like Nigeria. They went to great lengths to secure the likes of Saka and Tammy Abraham, but ultimately lost out. I think they lose out for two reasons. One, that it's in disarray. I can't speak for the other countries I just spoke about, like Algeria and Morocco, but it is in disarray. So I can see why you wouldn't want to do that. But then also as well, it's that case of not providing the right pathway for these youngsters to kind of shine. In more recent times, Michael Elisa Palace had a call up in March. He's now declined call up since. He's apparently he wants to represent. He's got a whole host of countries. I think Michael Elise can represent. This is Michael Elise of Crystal Palace. He can represent
Mm.
England, France, Algeria, and Nigeria. So he's got a full selection, and he doesn't want to represent them anymore. Um, and whilst this probably didn't affect the golden era as much, I think what Nigeria kind of needs to do is work much harder at and smarter at securing international talent quickly and showing them the path to international ball and showing them that they're a federation that's organized. You spoke about Josh Maja. He's actually played for Nigeria. I think he's got one cap.
Oh, right, okay.
You mentioned Dixon too, who again, British Nigerian born but British raised. He played about 33 times or so for Nigeria. Ademola Lookman, funnily enough. So this is where Nigeria are still making the same mistakes. He's declared that he's willing to play for Nigeria. Obviously scored the winner yesterday. Nigeria then haven't called him up to African Cup of Nations. Now, Ademola Lookman is 23. He probably wouldn't make the England squad, but his other level of talent where if he then put through a run of 18 months of good form, he could feasibly make the England side. And then Nigeria then have another problem on their hands where it's like, we've acted too slowly. They acted too slowly on Michael
Mm.
Elise. They called him up in March. This is when he was in the championship with Reading. They called him up to the preliminary, dropped him out the preliminary. Then obviously he's moved to Palace. He started the season quite well. He's got more options now. So now he's thinking, oh, actually, do I actually want to represent them or not? And it comes back to this kind of Declan Rice, Jack Grealish kind of scenario, which they need to get better at. There's people like Tosin at Fulham who they should target. Eze probably, but he'll be tricky as well because I know that England have already courted him. Would they want to play under such an unorganized federation? That remains to be seen.
Yeah, I think it's a great point around like your point around well, if the federation's in strife or the national team isn't a good environment to be in, then why would these young lads? Because they are young. They're like how old is Bukayo Saka? 20 years
It's
old,
not here, yeah.
19. You see the pictures of him, and I know he's an exceptional talent. So it's maybe not the best example. I don't know, but we saw him at St George's Park during the Euros on that bloody the stupid inflatable unicorns they put in the pool, and
Mm,
England have created this environment that I really one of the reasons I've championed Southgate, that a lot of these England players now want to be part of, because it's really seems like quite a happy environment, a good place for youth to prosper. And again, these people are so young and they want to be in a fun environment, but then if the other option for Bukayo Saka, even if he wants to play for Nigeria, is that he has to travel across the world to then be in an environment that isn't
yeah.
particularly harmonious, and there's problems with getting paid, there's problems with the coaches getting paid, and you don't even know who the coach is going to be, then I suppose that would be a good deterrent. So I think it's a really good point.
Yeah, very much so. I think kind of the next point as well to move on to is finding the next Okocha. So this is like a podcast in itself, which I've wanted to do for a long time, and many African sides, again, not just Nigeria, lack true eights or old-fashioned tens. I think Nigeria have solely missed an Okocha type in their arsenal. Is that down to poor scouting or training, or is it intrinsically linked to the fact that there aren't enough players of this type produced in Africa? If so, why? The player pool is obviously there because there's so many players, but I think the gaze of European scouts that pluck these African players are usually looking for Yaya Torres, powerful, strong, but technically very gifted, Wilfred Ndidis,
Mm,
Michael Essiens. And if they're not that, then they're the next type, which is Didier Drogba's, powerful, technically gifted strikers, or very quick strikers, Obafemi Martins, Chukwueze, the multitude of wingers in terms of Nicolas Pepe. The list goes on. Samuel Eto'o as well, and that kind of, you don't get Chavis, Iniestas, Paul Scholes. You don't get, okay, let's think of someone more modern. Billy Gilmore. There's no way you're going to get someone like Billy Gilmore
Mm.
coming through in African football, because he's not big, nor is he strong. He's not particularly fast from what I've seen. He's just technically very, very good. But there just seems to be a lack of scouting there, and I think that's because of the type of prejudice and stereotype that kind of surrounds African players they scout. I always say this to everyone I speak to, and to you as well. Alex Iwobi would never be playing professional football, and definitely not for Nigeria, had he been born and raised there. He's not
Mm.
quick. He's got good feet, nor is he particularly strong. He plays wide slash can play inside. He just doesn't have the attributes of what you typically deem in an African footballer, which is why in a Nigerian shirt he looks a bit different, because he's not of the normal profile that you normally see. Um, and I think there's definitely talent that must be getting overlooked. Even JJ Kocher, he was found by accident. So he came to Germany to see his cousin, his friend, who's playing in the Bundesliga, called Binebi Numa, who's playing in for a random third division side. One morning, a coach accompanied Newman to training and he asked to join in. And the coach was so impressed that he invited him back and offered him a contract. A year later, he joined another club, and then he joined Bundesliga and a Bundesliga 2 side. And then he had eventually moved to Eintracht Frankfurt in the actual Bundesliga. And that just shows the talent. I'm sure a coach is probably talented enough that he would have found his path another way, but I'm also not so sure, because Okocha again lacks predominantly a lot of the attributes that you look for in African midfielders, which is a bit stereotype, which I think needs to change. Because imagine now if Okocha never had that trip, would that mean we wouldn't have seen one of Africa's best showmen on the international stage or even in the Premier League?
Yeah, and it also means that like if all the players that are playing in Europe are of that profile, that means that and it depends on the coach. He might opt to pick players that are of a lower quality just to have those if they can find them. That certain type of profile, like you said, a Billy Gilmore type, maybe another type of Whoopi to play in certain different styles. But if the entire 11 is of a certain profile, they might all be playing at top leagues and top clubs in Europe,
Mm,
but the balance is not going to be there, and you're not going to have the mixture of player types that allows a coach to really like develop a philosophy or a different philosophy, or to
mhm,
have a plan B when things aren't going right. And some nations and many nations, you think about France in particular, like they've got access almost to that pool of West African players, and then they've also got access to their own nation, and so therefore the amount of player types they've got at international level to pick from is so broad. You think they've got access to the North African to an extent side as well. So, um, but if African clubs and agents, as you kind of allude to extent, if those clubs in Africa and the agents that circle them benefit financially from selling a certain type of player to Europe, then I wonder if there'll ever be an incentive to produce players in other molds. I'm not sure.
yes, it's a tricky one, and it's something which, yeah, you're right. Is there an incentive? It's not even necessarily an incentive, because the profile of players exists there. It's just they're not getting selected. We don't know how
Mm,
the careers go. It's that notion, right? Where people believe that no matter what type of, no matter how good you are, if you're good enough, you'll make it. But that's not true, I don't think, of football. Some people believe that. Some people believe if you've got the talent of Oxlade Chamberlain, you will always make it. When actually, I think that a lot of footballers, that's not the case. There is an element of luck. I think, yeah, there are some footballers that they're at the level where when you're Messi or Ronaldo, no matter where you are,
mm,
you probably would make it because they're the best players ever. I mean, there's a wide, wide range of footballers that would never necessarily make it had a few things gone differently, which is like a lot of these young African players. I don't even think it's necessarily an incentive. There could be brilliant tens in Ghana or eights, but the coach are thinking, not really for me.
mm,
That kid then decides, do I need to play local ball, or do I need to then end up working, or do I need to pack my bags and do something else? And when they do that, you miss out on that player. There
mm,
is the one guy who's come through recently called Nakwale. He was in the same team as Oshimen at the 2015 version of the under 17 World Cup and signed for Arsenal. He's like a real big throwback to the old type of crafty eight, very technically gifted. Unfortunately, it didn't work out for him at Arsenal. I think he's now playing La Liga, the second division in Spain for Huesca.
Segunda.
Segunda for Huesca, I believe.
Mm.
But yeah, he's a rare sight indeed. So I think kind of to wrap things up is kind of answering the question as will Nigeria actually rise, and when? I think at present, the federation is still hampering the side's progress. I mean, there's no permanent coach at the moment. They've sacked him before the African Cup of Nations, which is actually mad. But they are going for a real purple patch of forwards. I think to have Kelechi Iheanacho, who's playing at Leicester, is very good. Emmanuel Dennis, who can't stop scoring at Watford, is also young, he's
Mm.
24. I think Kelechi is 24. Oshimen is about 21, 22. You've also got Ewanini, which is he's in Union Berlin, I believe. So he was on Liverpool's books. He scored, I think, 12 Bundesliga goals, no, 10 Bundesliga goals this year. There's another young forwards. There's loads. There's Chukwueze on the wide areas, and Didi in midfield. Frank Onyeka, who is at Brentford, who's been playing week in week out for them. They've got some talented players playing at very good levels, not just clubs in big leagues, but clubs really pushing for European qualification. Some of them, and even higher in some cases, with Napoli fighting for the Serie A. So they've definitely got a young squad that can grow together. But in order to truly rise, one, you need the right man to actually guide them. Gerhard Rohr, I've not really spoken about, had dismal football. Like it just wasn't very good. The squad
Mm.
selections were questionable, and he wasn't really utilizing the best out of this young crop. And the federation also need to probably do a better job at nurturing these talents, and they haven't really shown that much so far to suggest that they're going to do that. But I guess you just have to hope. But I'd say the current crop now is as good, if not marginally better, than the golden era of the 90s. Perhaps it's a bit top heavy, but a lot of very, very good forwards, not so good in terms of maybe centre half. I mean, Taribo West representing Inter and AC Milan is real credibility to have in your defence, whereas they don't really have that now. They've got Troost Ekong, who is regular at Watford. But
Mm.
Watford aren't the same as AC or Inter, so it'd be interesting to kind of see how far Nigeria go, but if the federation have a say in it, it won't be very far.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to hopefully seeing a bit of Nigeria in the AFCON. I mean, we've talked about the appetite for football in Nigeria. We've talked about the population size, the success of the youth. These are all ingredients for a really, really powerful footballing nation. Um, so that in theory, Nigeria have the potential to compete with the best sides in the world in the future, potentially if they get things right. But that said, success for Nigeria in the short term is probably not about winning World Cups. It's about being more competitive continentally and um, internationally. What will the time difference be like with the Afcon? Where is it being staged?
So Cameroon's near Nigeria, so it's going to be like either an hour ahead or an hour behind. I can't think of precisely where it is. It'll be really close in time difference though, so don't worry, you'll be able to tune in.
Cool. Looking forward to watching it then. But yeah, thank you, Etches, for that episode. I know you've been wanting to do something on the Nigerian national team for a long, long time, and so hopefully we'll see some victories and some success in the AFCON. But yeah, thank you. Thank you all for listening. Please continue to follow us on Twitter and subscribe with us on all our platforms. Thank you guys, and a happy new year from all of us at Wyfutbol.
Cheers, guys.